between religion and human rights and your view about this. You mentioned the problems with writing the constitution in Pakistan and the fact that you couldn't decide for a long time whether the grounds were human rights or Sharia, and you were alluded to the same problems in Poland, and in Europe the debate is actually right now renewed with the Strasbourg verdict today. So my question is about your view about the limits of the public role of religion in a democracy. Are you a proponent of complete separation of religion and state, or do you think that some public presence of religion is inevitable? How much? Where would you, in theoretical terms, where do you draw the boundaries? And my second question has to do with the influence of Sharia on attitudes towards women. In other words, you say that these cruel practices, these cruel laws are actually at odds with Pakistani culture. But I wonder whether the culture has changed, whether women's attitudes and men's attitudes towards women have evolved, whether women have been devalued over those 20, 30 years.
Well, your first question is an interesting one, and it's a very complex question. When you look at the international law, and you look at the fact that there is only one declaration on religious intolerance. We don't have a convention yet. And the reason we don't have a convention is because it's very contentious. Despite the fact that under article of the ICCPR, we have limitations. I mean, there is no limitation on belief or faith as such at all. It's without any limitation. But the manifestation of it has certain limitations. For example, on public order, it says morality, although I still don't understand what morality is. It says as long as you don't violate the human rights of other people, and it doesn't discriminate. So these are, and there are other limitations, like for example, Article 20 of the ICCPR is one limit, that if there is incitement to violence in the name of religion or discrimination or hatred, that these are the limits that are there under international law. Now the application of this sometimes also has to be done case by case. And that is why you see that, for example, in the case of the Strasbourg judgment that has just come out on religious symbols, and even the subsequent judgments, particularly the one in Turkey, I certainly I haven't read the recent one, I've just read the text, a little bit, 2-3 lines on it. But certainly the one in Turkey I have a problem on. Because I think that it is not for the state to tell its subjects of what they should wear and what they should not wear. It can certainly for the state to ensure that everybody else's right is protected. So if a woman covers her head and insists on flying an airplane, I can imagine that that will not be allowed. But if a British airline air hostess has a small cross in her neck, I am a bit surprised that that was seen as being offensive to anyone else. I think that that by itself is intolerance. That you don't want to see religious symbol at all is a very intolerant act. I mean, I am a Muslim and I studied in a convent, and I don't think that it made me a Christian. We were colonized by the British. There were missionaries in our subcontinent, but how many became Christians? Hardly any. So I think that people don't have faith in their own faith at times. And to say that you expose children to symbols, why, if I see a Buddha, does that hurt me? I like to see a Buddha. So, or I like a nice cross. Or I like calligraphy. It doesn't hurt my sensibilities. So I think that that extremism also, and I'm sorry to say that judges sometimes can be very conservative also. And also, they are not thinking beyond Europe. You know, if you look at it beyond Europe, then would you then say that in the reverse, whether it's positive discrimination or negative discrimination, in the reverse, If a state can say you can't cover your head, then a state can also say do cover your head. And I think both are wrong. Until they violate the limitations that are there under international law, and that it becomes a public policy issue, or a law and order issue, or it impinges on somebody's safety and right, then I suppose that is something very different.
Hey, Professor Monica for the Warsaw University.
Thank you very much, Susan Monica for Warsaw University. I would like to ask you two questions, and in case you don't want to answer the second question, it would be all right with me. But the first question is, you are a working lawyer in the country that you represented with quite a lot of problems. I want you to know, what are the successful strategy to win? What are the successful strategy to win the cases? How do you do with the cases? How do you really win, if you win, the cases of women who are raped or women who have domestic violence experience? How do you do it over there? And the second question is really related a little bit to the situation we have with Afghanistan. I wonder, I know a lot about Pakistan through really Afghanistan, through the situation of refugee people from Afghanistan in Pakistan. And your opinion, what really Afghanistan needs? Is it electricians and plumbers rather than soldiers? Or is it really soldiers who can solve the problems faced over there?
Well, thank you very much. I think that you were right, that it did change the attitudes towards women. I didn't answer your last question. And women were devalued over the years, we saw that. But just to come back to your first question, I'm not an expert on Afghanistan. But I can just give you a very superficial answer, if you like, but please don't take it as something that I know very deeply. There are refugees in Pakistan, still are, and in fact some of the last cases I did was when one of the American State Department person was visiting, and our law enforcement went and swept all the Afghan refugees into jails, and I had to get them released on bail, because they had been there for many years. Some of them had not got their card from the UNHCR, but they had been there working. But there is always a streak when people want to show that we've got Taliban, and these poor Afghan refugees who've been working in carpet industry and other places are picked up and put in jail. And it was just as much admitted by the police in court. So this is the situation. They can neither go back, and they're finding it even more difficult to stay in Pakistan. The space is becoming very closed up for them. In Afghanistan, I think you need both. You need the tradesmen and you need the soldiers at the moment. But more than that, you also need the Afghan civil government to put its acts together. Just like you need our civilian government to put its act together.